As porn addicts, we've been on the defense so long that I think sometimes we've forgotten to go on the offense, right? We spend all our time just trying to figure out how we're going to avoid the terrible sin. And for some of us, we've spent years just trying to tackle this one sin. And so, again, we play defense over and over and over and over. And I'm of the opinion, once you've tackled this addiction, it's not enough to just then go back to normal. We're not really trying to find normalcy, we're creating a new normal. Look at prevent defense in sports. I think it's one of the worst things that was ever invented. In any sport, I play hockey, and man, I don't think it has ever worked out where we sit on our lead and it works out, and we win the game. We get up by 2-3 goals, it's like, all right, we're going to stop doing what actually worked, right, and we're going to sit back, we're going to play prevent defense, and just hope that the other team doesn't catch up. Meanwhile, we take 50 shots while we get 0 shots, and how does that work out? You see it in football all the time. It's terrible, and yet that's exactly what we do here with porn. We defeat it, but we go on prevent defense, and we just hope that the big bad porn monster doesn't come and get us. Perhaps another illustration is Indiana Jones, right? We think Indiana Jones versus Chariots of Fire. I mentioned this earlier in the week. Indiana Jones, of course, the guy's terrified, right? He's running for all he's worth. He's full of fear, dread, doubt. He's scared because that boulder is going to get him at any time, right? The reason we avoid porn is so that we don't get busted, so that our wife stays with us, right? So that we don't go to hell. And so every motivation to stay away from porn is negative, 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 negative. Yeah, we have to have some of those. Absolutely. I'm not saying we avoid those altogether, but if that's the only motivation is, man, if I fall, terrible things are going to happen. Do you know what that does? Elevates our stress. Do you know what happens when we elevate our stress? Makes it a lot harder, right? We're more likely to fall. Because all we're thinking about is, this is going to come get me, and I don't know what to do. Instead, we need to be running towards something, right? Chariots of Fire mentality. We are running the race, and now our motivation is freedom in Christ, because it feels amazing to not be scared, to not be worried about falling. We recognize our mistakes, and we get right back up. This is a big part of my work with my clients, is you'll have people that it's like, okay, I'm good to go. And it's like, you're still scared. You're still worried that it's going to get you. And you don't have any peace about you. You don't know what to do when you fall. You think it sets you back to phase 1, right? You go all the way to the beginning because it's like, I knew that I was a failure. I knew that I was just going to do this. And I'm right back to where I started. No, you're not. You went weeks without looking at it. That's something, right? We're gaining traction along the way. And we're going to start working on how we can actually defeat this and not just stay away from it. But now when we're running towards something, we're getting a greater sense of excitement from learning how to stop porn instead of using. We're willing to tell others about our journey because we're no longer afraid of it. It no longer holds that power over us. And no, this does not make us perfect. As I've mentioned, I still struggle at times, but I have the tools to work through it. I confess to my accountability partners. I confess to my wife. I put restrictions on the way that I access it. And now the falls are very few and far between. I don't go into the shame cycle after I fall. I've already been forgiven. I move on. I continue to live free. I continue to live peaceful. I continue to live with freedom in Christ. I once asked my client, I said, what's the right level of guilt to feel? Because he was just racked with guilt over and over and over. He'd fall and he was racked with guilt. And I said, what's the right level of guilt? When will you know you felt enough guilt before you can move on? And he thought about it, and he thought about it, and he thought about it. He says, I have absolutely no idea. I said, yeah, that's your problem. There is no, well, I've felt bad enough for a week, now I can move on. And so he continues to stay in the shame cycle, in a ton of guilt, and he was going nowhere until he realized, I have to forgive myself and move on. Really what we're looking at, this creates happiness, of course. What we're looking at is the reward. And the greatest part is you don't have to do it on your own. And as we looked at, you really can't do this on your own. And so who gets all the glory? Our Heavenly Father. Because you didn't do this on your own. This was His church family, His body, helping you out through your issues. You don't have to worry about this doing on your own and staying perfect. And making sure that you stay sober for the rest of your life. That is the goal. Do not get me wrong. That is absolutely the goal. And if you can, 1,000% do it. But if you fall, if it's going to be okay. We've eliminated white knuckle change, and we've instituted real change in Christ. And that's what this is all about, is all the glory goes to God. So right now I want to look at a to-do list. A to-do list. While we're thinking about the goal changing from avoiding porn to really overcoming porn and glorifying God in everything that we do, that becoming the goal, this glorification of God in every way possible, we've spent years working on one sin. Years. That's not what Christ called us to, right? Is work on that one big sin and get it out of your life. He calls us to absolute sacrifice. He calls us to chase Him with everything we have. And there's a huge difference in that. And so, when we talk about defeating porn, when we think about what to do now, it's not just avoid porn. It's not just get away from it. We have a to-do list. And so first, we're going to use our story to glorify God. I'm going to have a slide just for each of these. This is one of the quicker sessions that we have. But it's about getting out of the mindset of, man, I'm scared to death of falling. And it's more getting into the mindset of what can we do to make this the most glorifying to God possible. That is the end of all things, right? That's what we are supposed to do. That's why Christ came, Philippians 2:11, right? So to glorify God. That's everything we are supposed to be about. And we can use our struggles to glorify God just as much. So first, we're going to use our story for good. Second, explore God's purpose for sex. We're going to improve marital bliss, and we're going to find purpose as a single person. That's what we're going to work on today. And so if you've been listening to this seminar going, well, this is great information, but I'm not a porn addict, so I can kind of sit back. This lesson is for you. There are things that have nothing to do with you being a porn addict that you can still work on with your spouse or if you're single. First, use your story. I believe every recovering addict should be an ambassador for sobriety. There's really no reason not to be. When you are coming out of it, that testimony alone, I was talking with Jeff about this yesterday, the power of a Christian saying, man, I've been there where you are. I've been in sin. It's terrible. It hurts. It's ugly. But Christ is good. How powerful is that instead of, well, I'm up here, you're down here, and one day, if you're good enough, you can be on my level. There's no people in the world, and I have experience with this because I was that guy looking down on them. And they call me Christian Joe at hockey, and it's like, wow, we can never be Christian Joe. That's terrible. That's absolutely terrible. I gave them no pathway to be where I am. When in reality, for most of this, I was a porn addict. And I was scared to tell them. I wasn't using my story. And what would that have done if I could have just gotten on their level and said, you know what? I'm a porn addict. And I struggle with sin just as much as you do. The difference is the blood of Christ. That would have meant all the world to them, and I was too afraid to use my story for my pride. We're going to use our story. Discover why God allowed you to wrestle with this. Each person has a unique story, and they have potential to change lives within that story. And if you change just one life for the better, would it not have been worth it to go through it? After coming through porn, I hope you realize that God's given you a true gift to use with people. It's amazing when you can tell your story. When I can get up here and tell my story and have other people go, that's me. That makes me feel great because it's like, I'm not alone. And you know how many people have come out of it and how encouraging that is to see how many people have come out of it? And for those that are still struggling, that's okay. You're not alone. And if that's all I'm up here to do is just to let you know you're not alone and there's hope, there's help, that's all I'm looking to do. And you can do the exact same thing. Use your story. Let others know they are not alone. So God let me struggle with it for close to a decade, and I think, to be honest, I think this is the reason. To be here speaking to you, God did not snatch me out of the fire 2 years in. He let me go through it all until I hit rock bottom, and now I'm able to be here. And one of the biggest things is, again, I'm trying to let people know you're not alone. And if that's what you do with your porn addiction is just to say, I've been there, you're not alone. I can tell you from an addict's point of view, that means the world. That means the world for somebody to say, you're not a pervert, you're not a freak, you're not a weirdo. I struggle with it too. And it's like, oh, wow. It's eye-opening. Tell them your path to sobriety. Offer them hope. Let them know there is something better. And in your weakness, Christ's power has been made perfect. I have said this quite a bit throughout the week, and this is just a verse that I live by. Because when we point to our own power, again, we get the glory, And it's just shallow. It's shallow because every other human's looking at it going, I don't have that power. I just don't, that's great. You have self-control like Superman. I don't. So what do? And in reality, I don't have self-control worth jack squat. I am changed by the blood of Christ and by His grace. And that's the only reason I'm standing up here today. And so use this and realize it is not our strength that is putting us in a position of authority, that's allowing us to use our story. It's our weakness. And we point to Christ and we give Him all the glory. Explore God's purpose for sex. We know in Genesis 2:18, it's not good for man to be alone. Matter of fact, this is the first time in the Bible where God says something is not good. Everything else in creation was good, and He says it's not good for man to be alone. I've always found that interesting. I've thought that's, how unique is that? Everything else is good. And God's the one that calls it out. Adam doesn't even say, hey, God, I think you messed up. God goes, you know what? In my own creation, I don't think it's good for man to be alone. That doesn't mean God's not perfect. It doesn't mean His creation wasn't perfect. It just means that God saw a way that things could be improved. And I think this is the reason He allowed it is He allowed Adam to be on his own. He allowed Adam to realize what he was missing. If He'd created Eve, first off, who are you? I don't need you. He absolutely needed her. This was all in God's providence and all in His wisdom. But was God just giving Adam someone to fulfill his sexual needs? No. God saw that man needed someone he could be fully intimate with in every way. With God, he could be open for sure. Of course, he walked with God in the garden, but he's not on God's level spiritually. He's not on God's level emotionally, intellectually, or physically. It is impossible for man to be on God's level. And so how can we fully be intimate and relate? He can be intimate with us, absolutely. And that's what we strive for, but we are not God, and we never will be God. And He needed to create someone that we could be intimate with on that level. So He gave us someone to cherish and to love and to be intimate with. Sex with your spouse isn't about fulfilling some animalistic need. A lot of people will put sex on the animalistic level. Don't do that. It is not an animalistic need. It's about experiencing intimacy with them on a level unlike anything else. True and satisfying sexual satisfaction really can only be achieved when both are naked with one another and not just physically. When you're holding secrets, there are things that you have, you're holding grudges with your spouse, and there are things that are behind their back that they don't know about, your sex is going to suffer. I guarantee you your sex is going to suffer because you're not intimate with them. You're not open. You may be physically naked, it doesn't matter. You haven't been emotionally. You haven't been intellectually if you're lying. And if you're doing those things, you're also not spiritually intimate with them either. I guarantee you that. My contention is that people in emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually happy marriages have greater sex. It's not about the physical near as much. And I've talked to a couple people about this. I want to study this because this is a hypothesis, so I'm not going to preach this as gospel fact. But I do think that there's a correlation between fulfilling emotional lives and a decreased libido. Because in my work, I've seen a lot of people the people in the healthiest and happiest marriages have less sex. You come talk to me after. That's just something that I've noticed in my work and with a lot of people that I know. What I think it is, personally, is they're having their true needs fulfilled. Their spiritual needs, their emotional needs. They don't need to run to physical to want it all the time. And the people in terrible marriages, the people in unfulfilled emotional marriages, they want sex every day because they're trying to recreate something that they're not getting elsewhere. That's my thought. I'll move on. Sex is intended to be joyous and euphoric for both the man and the woman. So often the wife makes sex a chore. That's not to stereotype anybody, but that does happen quite a bit, where it's like, well, I just need to fulfill my husband's needs and move on. It's not really my thing, but I know I'm commanded to do it, and so I'm supposed to. That's not what God intended sex to be for. A chore for the woman, and where the man feels like he has to use his wife over and over and over just to fulfill his animalistic needs. That's not the purpose of sex. And we're bringing sex down to a base level that it was never intended to be. This is a beautiful, holy thing from God that both men and women need to see. And they need to work together to create this euphoria and to create this intimacy that only they can create together. This is not about the husband forcing himself on the wife and the wife just giving it up because she has to. I guess I have to. I can't withhold. 1 Corinthians 7. Otherwise I would. No. It's not intended to be used for control. It's not intended to be used for for bargaining chip. It's a beautiful thing between a husband and wife. Porn users try to satisfy their need for intimacy through physical means. To be quite honest, many married couples do this as well. Sex is intended to be the pinnacle of intimacy, not the base. We're going to look at that in just a bit. But again, for those who are married in this room and you say, well, I don't really struggle with porn, check yourself on your sex life. It may be fantastic. This is, I understand, a private thing in the bedroom. You don't have to come talk to me after. But check yourself on it. Because if you're using sex just to fulfill your physical means or just to try to compensate for something else that's lacking in the marriage, your sex life's not going to be near as good, and you will encounter problems in the future. I'll just tell you that. You will encounter problems. And we don't really separate ourselves. When porn users just try to get it through physical means, marriages do the exact same thing. They elevate the sex and say, this is everything. No, it's not. That's simply the pinnacle of what we're supposed to have, right? It's the pinnacle of a life built on intimacy. You've been spiritually intimate and open. You don't have lies. You're on the same page with them spiritually. You've been emotionally intimate with them. You've opened up about your emotions and about your feelings and your thoughts and your goals and everything else, your dreams in life. You've been intellectually open and intimate with them. You've built a friendship unlike anything else, and sex is the pinnacle of that. Sex is intended to be at the very top of a life full of intimacy. And that's when sex is at its best, is when the other three have been taken care of. And if you're trying to flip this upside down, it doesn't work. Because what happens? It wobbles, right? It wobbles. It tips side to side. It's not going to work when you try to build on the physical. The physical is the smallest part of life. You can only have sex so much. It's not going to fulfill you in every way that it should, or every way that you think it will, if you're trying to build your relationship on the physical first. Build it on the rest. All right. Perfect. Next on our list is to improve marital bliss, right? So we've looked at using our story, and we've looked at exploring God's purpose for sex, His actual purpose for sex, which, by the way, be teaching your kids this, be teaching people in your church this. They don't know the purpose for sex. Every single time I ask the people I work with in premarital counseling, I ask, hey, so what's the purpose for sex? Well, I guess to have kids, to procreate. Is that it? Well, I guess. Then why did God make it so pleasurable? I don't know. And we're talking people that have been in the church for decades, for their entire life. 20s, 30-year-olds, into their 30s. They have no idea. People don't know the purpose for sex. You have to be there to work with them and to teach them that and to show them that there's more than just fulfilling an animalistic need. But I'll get off my soapbox there. It gets me. Improve marital bliss. We want to improve it. We're going to look at, again, the intimacy pyramid here. We're going to improve it first spiritually. How do we do this? Well, frequently read the Bible together and pray. This is a no-brainer. You absolutely should be doing this. This is why it's first on the list. Read spiritual books together. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of great books out there. Marriage books, spiritual marriage books, spiritual books in general, exegetical books. Get in something with your spouse. Be reading those together. Find a ministry together. Man, when you're talking fulfilling the spiritual intimacy, when you're working in a ministry with your spouse, it is amazing. It's amazing because, she will bring something that I've never even considered. Just wasn't on my radar. That builds quite a bit of intimacy. Choose an older couple as mentors, or be mentors to a younger couple. This also can help, because when you're able to impart the wisdom you've learned, and sometimes the wisdom is, don't do this. We've been there and it hurts. Sometimes the wisdom is, hey, this was great. We've been doing this for 50 years. And we have a very happy marriage, right? Or, if you're just married, find somebody older and say, please mentor us. We want to know how to navigate these problems of life. And set mutual spiritual goals. Where do we want to be in 5 years? Where do we want to be in a year, right? What are we looking to do this month? Set these spiritual goals together. Hold each other accountable. Pray about it. Again, study together with one another. Second is emotional intimacy. Again, we build it up based on, in my opinion, the most important. Get on the spiritual level. Get on the emotional level. How do we do that? Share everyday emotions with one another. You think this is super easy. It's not. A lot of couples don't. They have what I call logistical marriages. Everything is logistics. You can pick the kid up from soccer practice. Oh, yeah. Okay, what are we having for dinner tonight? Do you need me to pick up the groceries? Great. Yeah, I have some, a work function tomorrow. Can you, would you mind baking cookies for that? Yeah, I can bake the cookies. Okay, what time do the kids go to bed? You need to just, did you record my show? Did you do this? At what point did you stop and connect with the other person? Everything is logistics. And so the emotional intimacy is just not there, because maybe it's intellectual intimacy, but we're missing this part. Share everyday emotions with one another. Let them know how the day was. How was the day? Well, it was all right. Okay, cool. Let's have dinner. No. Just all right? What's going on? Well, today was a tough day at work, and it was, something didn't go right? The project that I've been working on just, kind of fell flat. And I'm really sorry to hear that. How do you feel about that? That can sound contrived, but it's amazing when you say, how are you feeling right now? It helps, and it gives them an opportunity to open up about the deeper emotions. Work on listening to each other. I use what I call a talking lion. I have a little stuffed animal lion. If you're holding it, you can talk. If you're not, don't. If you want to raise your hand and get ready to talk, pass the lion when you're done. You can do it. They call it a talking stick. I know people that have a giant ruler in their house, like the 3-foot ruler, and they pass it around. If you struggle to connect with your spouse in this way, set a timer. You can talk for 5 minutes, I can talk for 5 minutes. Here's the talking lion, the talking stick. We'll go back and forth. If you're struggling talking with them. Otherwise, work on listening to each other. Active listening, where you can repeat back what they just said. And I can't tell you the number of times where I'm just, looking at my phone and well, what'd I say? You were talking about, I don't know. How often does that happen? Active listening. That helps improve the marital or the emotional intimacy. Frequently share memories with one another. Think back on the good old days when we were first together. There was a euphoria about those days that people kind of forget. And don't forget those. Those are amazing times. Share a lot of memories together and build the emotional pathways. Gottman, if you guys are familiar with John Gottman, has his love pathways, I want to say. Love maps is what it is. You work on your love maps. Write love letters to each other. It can sound cheesy, corny. Do it. This is fantastic. Let them know how much you're still in love with them. Build that emotional connection. And take the 5 love languages test. It's free online. Find new ways to love each other. Working with a couple right now who is, the woman is just, all about acts of service and haven't I shown up for you and haven't I done this and haven't I done that? The other's just like, you haven't been there. You've been there physically, but you really haven't listened to me. And the time we spent together is not quality time. Well, they have not taken the 5 love languages, and I'm like, well, I can tell you what it is, right? I told them, as actually homework, to take this and start meeting those needs. I can give you 1,000 gifts, and you're going, you know what? I just was hoping that you could, fix the garbage compactor, right? Or fix the garbage disposal. And so it's acts of service is what you need, and I'm giving you 1,000 gifts going, don't you feel the love? And you go, no, right? That's what happens in marriages. And so again, this is not a marriage seminar. I understand we're still in the realm of pornography, but when we're going through this, you have to build emotional intimacy. If you hope to get out of this, you have to build emotional intimacy. And you build this with others. This is with your spouse, but you build this with others as well. I believe that, and you've probably recognized this too, sex usually happens after deep conversations, after solving problems together, maybe even after having a fight where you two reconcile. And why do you think that is? All of a sudden I'm more aroused at that moment? No. We have come together emotionally in a deeper way. We've connected in a deeper way than maybe we have in a long time. We're now a team again. We can be open again. Obviously, lying and secrets kill emotional intimacy. Obviously, that doesn't really need to be stated, but if you're keeping those, it's going to affect the marriage. Next, improve marital bliss through intellectual intimacy. Discuss current world events and some new ideas, right? If we keep going back to the same, well, here's what's on the news, here's what's on the news, here's what's on the news, here's what's on the news. Okay, that's great. But what about new ideas, right? Everybody's got new ideas. Challenge each other. Work with each other on these things. Set short-term and long-term goals. And these could be just dreams. Man, I really want to go to the Grand Canyon. Yeah, let's dream about that. When can we do that? How can we make that a reality? Right? Well, I really wanted to go to Niagara Falls, or I really want to go on an international mission trip. Right? We'll get with Jeff and Darren and, make it happen. Get some work done while you're there. Set these goals. Dream together. My wife and I have these by conversation starters. You can find these on Amazon. Table Topics, the blue Table Topics, I can't remember what it is. I think it's just couples. Is the one we have. It's fantastic. There are so many good conversation starters. You use it at the start of the day, and it kicks off conversation. Just fun stuff. Nothing super heavy, but a lot of fun stuff. Set aside time each day to talk about the day's events. Talk about the emotions of it, of course, but talk about the day's events. Be in each other's lives. What kind of friend would I be if, after every single day it's like, hey, then we just walk our separate ways, right? Or again, it's all about the logistics of who needs to go where, who needs to do what, and it's responsibility. At what point do I build this friendship? That's what helps us stay in love with our spouse. That's what helps us develop that intellectual intimacy where we don't need to run to porn for our stress. We go and talk to our best friend about the day's events. It's been a tough day. Let me tell you about it. Read books together. Once again, on the spiritual, read spiritual books together, but on this, I think that sharpens the mind and it gets us outside ourselves and thinking about things in a different way. And it's great to share. So what have you been reading recently? My wife is amazing. She is incredibly fast at reading. I am not. So she'll get through 5 books by the time I get through 1. Probably more than that. She'll read a book in a few hours and it's like, takes me off. I wish I was faster. But man, she learns so much, and I'm fascinated to know what she learns because she reads really interesting books. So I'll just ask her. And we'll talk for hours about what she just read. And I'll ask her questions on it, and she'll, her reading comprehension is also incredibly high, which I'm jealous of. But reading books together is a great way to build the friendship. And that's what intellectual intimacy is all about, building the friendship there. Last, the physical intimacy. Once again, shouldn't need to be said, but prioritize sex. I know people who set timers. Seems a little bit too structured for me, but whatever works for you. They'll set reminders of today is the day for sex or whatever else. Seems difficult thinking about how sex works, but at the same time, the idea is we don't want to go so long where it's like, and man, when you first get married, you think, well, we're going to have sex every day. It's going to be incredible. And then life hits, both have jobs, kids arrive, you got a bazillion things going on, and guess what gets put on the back burner? Sex. And if you are still working on the other areas of your relationship, that's great, and you'll find that I think you won't need this quite as much. At the same time, sex is still very, very important. It's still a function that God intended to have happen in the marriage, and there's a lot of time in the Bible spent on sex. Prioritize it. Make sure that we're thinking about each other, right? Discuss sexual preferences for the bedroom. New ideas. Yeah, this is at a seminar in a church. I realize that. Yes, we do need to be thinking about not ways to spice it up to fulfill pornographic fantasies, not at all, but still be thinking about how we can please each other more and more and more. The more, and anybody who's been married for a long time knows, you grow closer to this person and you begin to know what they like, what they want, how to please them more in the bedroom, and that's all this is about. Just find those preferences, discuss with one another, be physically intimate. Frequently comment on each other's sex appeal. Write sexy notes to each other. Once again, you say, that's a little cheesy. It works. It works. And what is really at play here? You're touching the friendship, right? And the emotion there, where it's like, man, it feels good to be wanted. It feels good to be loved, but they also find me very attractive. And that boosts the confidence, which actually will boost in boosting self-esteem, it boosts your sex life as well. Because people who have low self-esteem have a tough time having sex because they don't think that they're pretty enough or that they're good-looking enough or that they're in shape enough to really be something their spouse wants. Let them know, no, you are who I desire. Always try to please the other person in sex more than yourself. This is the basics, but yes, listen to their needs. Listen to their desires. The goal is to please them, not yourself. For porn addicts, the goal has been to please ourselves, please ourselves, please ourselves. And when we take that into the bedroom, the sex suffers and the wife feels used. And then she can end up hating sex and we wonder why she hates sex. Well, she just doesn't want to have sex with me anymore. Well, maybe you were using her as your porn. Maybe you need to start treating her like your wife, taking care of her needs and not just yours. Last, find purpose while single. A little small, I apologize. Sex is holy and something to be cherished. Do not cheapen it. To the singles in the room, do not cheapen it by rushing it. Instead, build intimacy with others on the bottom three of the pyramid. There's nothing that says you can't be intimate spiritually, emotionally, and intellectually with your friends, with another guy in your life. If you're a girl, with another girl in your life. You can absolutely build those bonds of intimacy. And when your future spouse comes along, you'll have practice of building the beginning three, right, the bottom three, and then the sex is going to be amazing when you get to marriage in its proper context. Don't rush it, though, and think that sex is everything. No, it's not. It's going to be a huge letdown when you get there and realize, man, shame just came rushing in, guilt came rushing in, and this person might leave me tomorrow. Well, now I gave them a holy and beautiful part of myself, and we're not married. They could bounce in a month, and a lot of them do. And guilt and shame racks both of them if they're Christians, and that adds more fuel to the flame. Don't do it. Find a mentor who can empathize with your struggles and who can provide wisdom. There are plenty of people who are single for a long time and they know the struggles. If you're struggling with that, find somebody who can empathize with that. Maybe reach out to friends who might know friends, that they can provide wisdom. Cherish and grow the relationships already in your life. If you feel alone, seek more relationships with people. We think that I'm alone and so I have to have a spouse. No, you don't. No, you don't. You know, when David felt alone and was being chased by Saul, who did he have? Jonathan. It wasn't sexual. Nothing sexual about it. But he was still having his needs fulfilled, his emotional needs of a bond, a brother who cared about him, who loved him unconditionally, who was willing to hide him from his own father. Right? That's what David needed in that moment. He didn't need a spouse. He needed somebody to help fulfill his needs in that way, and God provided. So if you're thinking, I need a spouse, I need a spouse, I need a spouse, I need a spouse, maybe step back and think, what is it about a spouse that I need? Why do I want the spouse so much? Could it be that really what I need is just a friend that I can be open and honest with, a friend that I can trust deeply with everything, every part of my being? And if I can't seem to do that with any other friend, what makes me think I'll do it with a spouse? A lot of people think that it's just going to, boom, when I know it's the one, that's when, I'll come clean with everything. No, chances are if you haven't with other people in your life, you probably won't with her because you're afraid of people's rejection. Well, find friends. Cherish and grow the relationships in your life and don't push them to the side in search of a spouse. People are still important. Find a ministry or seek a work outside of yourself. You may not be able to put yourself fully into a spouse yet, but you can practice by putting yourself into a work, into a ministry. Again, this is kind of fulfilling the spiritual intimacy when you start connecting with other people to help find a work in your life. But when we're focused again on just, I got to get prepped for marriage, how often, it's the same thing that porn addicts do, where it's like, I just got to get free from this, and everything else in life is forgotten. Every other sin that they possibly struggle with is forgotten. I've worked with singles where everything else is forgotten, but I need a spouse. Get outside yourself and find a ministry. That's not calling out anybody in particular, but again, I've worked with a lot of people like that all they can think about is marriage. Marriage is beautiful in its own context, but there's a lot of beautiful things about life that have nothing to do with marriage. Part of that is finding a work or finding a ministry for the Lord, and putting yourself into that. Last, become a whole and healthy individual. Don't ever think the other person will complete you. Man, do not trust Disney Channel, okay? If you grew up on Disney Channel and it's the chase your dreams and the other person completes me, no, they don't. And if you think they're going to complete you, you will have a tough marriage, a very tough marriage. It's one of the first things in premarital therapy premarital counseling that I tell people. Don't think the other person is going to complete you. If you're going to come in, well, I lack this and this and this, but they kind of make up for that. Yeah, and what happens when they don't? What happens when they're tired of picking up your slack because you're not a whole individual? What happens when you bring a ton of emotional baggage from your past trauma into the relationship and You think your attachment issues from your dad leaving or from your mom leaving isn't going to be brought into the marriage because they complete me and they help me and realize that they're there for me. And what happens the moment that they don't come home on time? Your brain runs to, they left me. You can't figure out why. Yeah, because it's connected to past trauma that you didn't figure out. You didn't think you needed to figure out. Become a whole, healthy individual and don't think that the other person is going to just, any slack that you have, they'll pick up. That's not fair to them. And to be honest, vice versa. It's not fair to you for them to come in as a less than whole individual with their own traumas and their own everything else, hoping that you're going to be the one to fix it. It's unrealistic expectations. So that doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. Not by any means. Nobody's perfect. Your spouse is meant to be somebody that loves you, cherishes you, and they will pick up your slack. 1000%. My wife does all the time for me. But at the same time, I tried to, and I still work on being my own self, right? Being as good as I can be, and she's as good as she can be, and together, 100% and 100%. Not 50 and 50, but 100% and 100% makes something completely new and better. So continue to work on yourself, continue to become whole and healthy on your own, because the moment, I'm of the opinion, and this might not be popular, the moment you desperately need your spouse instead of wanting them, when that changes and you start needing them more than you want them, in my experience, you experience a lot of problems. You should want your spouse 1000%. Want them for all their flaws and everything else. You love them and you want them. But when you need them, what happens when they're not there for you? Things start to tank. You can learn this while you're single. So you want that person. You don't need them to fulfill you. You want them to be there to walk through life together. I want to thank you all. This has been an amazing opportunity. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your support, for your kind words. You guys are incredible. I've had the absolute best time here, and yeah, I really, really appreciate you guys giving me the time to speak on a topic that's just uncomfortable for a lot of people, but you've been attentive, you listened, you've walked through this entire week together fully knowing that every day you walk in you're going to get something bizarre or taboo or me using words that you didn't want to hear in a church building. So I really do appreciate it. Thank you guys for your time, and thank you for this week.
Yeah, we're training new guys up there this week, so first of all, Joe, thank you so much for this week. And to all of you, was this worthwhile? Okay, so here's what I want to do. Not because Joe is the amazing person that he is, and I think that he is, but that God has brought him through to where he is in his journey, and that he's able to share this in a comfortable way with us, to open up our minds, to get us to think outside of things that we're not normally used to talking about, and to give the glory to God. Thank you. Joe, I think I speak for most everybody in here that you are welcome around here. And we appreciate you coming very, very much. This is a topic, as he's said all week long, that we need to engage ourselves in. Mainly because it's before us. Mainly because it's infiltrating every part of our society, and especially our church. And the less we talk about it, the more that it invades. And we know it here. We know it. It's at Sunset. It's in every different congregation. So this needs to be a conversation that's on our hearts, that's on our minds, that's on our tongues. I don't hesitate to bring my 14-year-old here. It opens up conversations with us that we can talk about this. So take this and run with this. I know that many of you have contacted Joe and have had little conversations, have his contact information rather. So anyway, I'm excited about our relationship moving forward, and as we learn to, in healthy ways, discuss this and other topics more and more. Gibby?